In the summer of 2026, a text message ended an era. No press conference, no statement, no warning, just a quiet no from a 25-year-old to the biggest club on the planet. Real Madrid offered Vinicius Junior a new contract. He turned it down. And somewhere in North London, Arsenal picked up the phone. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that quiet no might be the most consequential word spoken in football all year. Because this isn't just a transfer story. It's a story about what happens when a club finally gets the player it always wanted and then doesn't know what to do with him. Stay with me, because the ending of this one is still being written. Let's go back to where it all started. Rewind 8 years. A skinny teenager from São Gonçalo, Brazil, walks into the most demanding club in world football with a price tag of 45 million euros attached to his name. He hasn't played a single senior match for Real Madrid yet. The fans haven't seen him kick a ball in white, but the number is already a burden. 45 million says you better be worth it before you've even proven you belong. He wasn't worth it, not yet. The early years were brutal. Missed chances, wasted runs. A stadium that groaned every time he took a heavy touch. Spanish pundits called him a mess. Some said he'd never make it in La Liga, that his body was built for speed but not for football intelligence. The boy who was supposed to be the future of Real Madrid looked, for a while, like another expensive mistake in a long line of them. Real Madrid fans are not known for patience. The Bernabeu has ended careers before they started. Players with far more experience than a teenage Vinicius Junior have been booed out of the club within a single season. But something kept him there. Stubbornness. Belief. Maybe both. Because slowly, painfully, touch by touch, he rebuilt himself into something nobody expected. He worked obsessively on his end product. He absorbed pressure that would have broken most 20-year-olds. He kept showing up, kept taking the ball in tight spaces, kept trying the same runs that had failed 100 times before, until on the 101st attempt, they started working. By the time he lifted the Champions League trophy in 2024, Vinicius Junior wasn't just surviving at Real Madrid, he was the club's heartbeat. The fastest player in Europe, a Ballon d'Or contender, the man defenders feared and fans adored. Opposition managers built entire game plans around stopping one player, and it was him. He had done what almost nobody does. He had turned doubt into dominance at the hardest club in the world to do it. So here's the question that should stop you in your tracks. If Vinicius Junior finally became everything Real Madrid dreamed he'd be, why is he the one saying no to them now? To understand that, you have to understand what changed inside the club around him, not what changed in him. In the summer of 2026, José Mourinho returned to manage Real Madrid. Let that sink in for a moment, because the history here matters more than people are giving it credit for. This is not the young, hungry Mourinho who once tore through Europe with Porto and Inter Milan, all fearless swagger and tactical brilliance. This is a different version, battle-scarred, uncompromising. A manager who has clashed with dressing rooms from London to Rome to Manchester. A manager who has never been afraid to sacrifice a star player's ego if he believes the structure of the team demands it. Mourinho's football has always been built the same way, no matter the club. Control the space, control the risk, make the opponent suffer before you ever try to entertain your own fans. Vinicius Junior's entire identity as a footballer is the opposite of that philosophy. He thrives in chaos. He takes players on in one-against-one situations that most coaches consider reckless. He gambles constantly on his own instincts, and for years, that gamble paid off spectacularly for Real Madrid. Now imagine being the manager whose entire career is built on eliminating exactly that kind of unpredictability, and being handed the one player in the world whose greatness depends on it. That is the collision at the center of this story. Sources close to the club describe a relationship that soured quickly. Training ground disagreements over positioning, tactical instructions that limited Vinicius Junior's freedom on the left flank. A player who felt his instincts, the very instincts that made him a Champions League winner, were suddenly being treated as a liability instead of a weapon. And it wasn't just happening on the training pitch. Around the same time, Real Madrid's boardroom was consumed by chaos of its own making. A presidential election, hotly contested, turned into a spectacle. A rival candidate, Enrique Riquelme, publicly claimed he had already struck a deal to bring Manchester City's Erling Haaland to the club if he won the election. Manchester City responded with threats of legal action. The story dominated Spanish sports media for weeks, turning what should have been a football decision into a circus. Picture what that looks like from inside the dressing room. You're the best player at the club. You've given 8 years of your career, your body, your reputation, to turn yourself into a Real Madrid legend. And the biggest story about your club isn't about the football at all. It's about politics, promises, and a striker who was never even signed. Vinicius Junior watched all of this unfold from the inside. A club he had bled for, suddenly more interested in campaign promises than in protecting the player who had already delivered for them. And then, right in the middle of all that noise, came the offer. Real Madrid, wanting to lock down their prize asset before other clubs could circle, put a new long-term contract on the table. Bigger wages, a longer commitment. The kind of deal most players in world football would sign without a single moment of hesitation. Vinicius Junior said no. Not a public no. Not a dramatic no. No interviews, no farewell statement, no fan uproar in the moment it happened. A quiet no. And a quiet no is far more dangerous to a football club than a loud one, because it means the decision has already been made behind closed doors, weighed carefully, and settled on. The public explanation, whenever it comes, is just a formality waiting to happen. Word reached England within days. Arsenal, freshly crowned Premier League champions and building one of the most ambitious squads in Europe, made their intentions clear almost immediately. They were prepared to break the bank. Think carefully about what that actually means. For over a decade, Arsenal were the club other teams used as a cautionary tale. Big ambitions, thin trophy cabinet, selling their best players instead of buying the world's best. That version of Arsenal does not exist anymore. This is a club that has already proven it can win England's biggest prize. A club with the financial muscle and the footballing project to genuinely compete for a player who once seemed permanently out of reach for anyone outside Spain's elite or the state-funded superclubs of the Gulf. If Vinicius Junior walks into the Emirates next season, it would not simply be another transfer headline scrolling past on your phone. It would be a changing of the guard in European football's power structure. It would be proof that the biggest stars in the world no longer have to chase history. They can chase ambition instead, wherever it happens to be. So why does any of this actually matter beyond one player and one contract? Because Vinicius Junior's story was supposed to be finished already. Doubted kid becomes club legend. That is the ending everyone had already written in their heads. A tidy story. A statue outside the stadium one day. Instead, right when the story should have settled comfortably into its happy final chapter, it cracked open into something far more complicated and far more human. A manager who prizes control, clashing head-on with a player defined by chaos and instinct. A boardroom consumed by an election and a striker who was never even signed, while the actual football operation drifted. And a rival across Europe, patient, ambitious, and financially loaded, waiting for the exact moment the door creaked open, ready to walk straight through it. This is what makes football endlessly watchable, year after year. It is never really about the 11 players lining up on the pitch. It is about egos clashing behind closed doors. It is about timing. It is about the small, quiet decisions made in private offices and training ground corridors that end up reshaping the entire landscape of the sport months later. Vinicius Junior spent 8 years proving Real Madrid right about him. Now he might spend the next chapter of his career proving that they should have handled him differently, and that even the biggest club in the world isn't immune to losing what it has if it stops protecting it. Whether he stays and fights for his place under Mourinho's new regime, grinding through another rebuild the way he ground through his first difficult seasons in Spain, or whether he walks into a new era in North London under a manager and a project built to actually maximize what makes him dangerous, one thing is already certain. The version of Vinicius Junior we thought we fully understood is about to be tested in a way it never has been before. And however this ends, it will tell us something bigger about modern football than just where one player ends up playing next season. It tells us that loyalty has a shelf life, even at the biggest clubs in the world. It tells us that talent alone was never enough to keep a superstar in place. Environment matters, trust matters, the feeling of being wanted, not just needed, matters. And it tells us that even a club with the history, the trophies, and the global brand of Real Madrid can lose a player, not through money and not through a rival simply outbidding them, but through mismanagement of the very thing that made him great in the first place. If you want to keep following stories like this one, the ones unfolding in real time, before the headlines even catch up to what's actually happening behind the scenes, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And I want to know what you think. If you believe Vinicius Junior should stay and fight for his place at Real Madrid, drop that in the comments. If you think Arsenal is exactly where his next chapter belongs, tell me why. I read every single comment on these videos, and some of the best insight in this community comes directly from you. This story isn't finished yet. Neither are we. See you in the next one.